Welcome to YouTooSpain. On this video I'm going to respond to a recent video I watched all about people moving back to the UK in droves after Brexit. Are they? And if so and if not, why not and why so? That particular video was made in Torrevieja, which is still full of Brits. So they've not all left. Don't panic. Now, there was a lot of mixed up and sometimes inaccurate information on that video and on quite a few others I've watched on the same subject as well. They do seem to be all based on hearsay and talking to people in the pub and looking at the number of boarded up shops and bars on the local streets, which only gives you a very narrow picture of the situation. Because as usual, there's a lot more to it than what you can see right in front of your eyes. But let's do some fact checking and looking at the bigger picture, shall we? I'm going to be using the official statistics and analysis, but don't worry, don't panic, it's not all about boring numbers. I'm not going to put you to sleep. Plus, some of my own experiences of talking to Brits across the whole of Spain on my live shows and face-to-face, and from talking to experts on the show who help people with their battles bureaucracy on a daily basis. Battles bureaucracy, battles with bureaucracy, that's what I mean, because they're in a great position to be able to comment on Brits either leaving or coming into Spain. They're in touch with them and officials all the time. So, you're all very welcome to YouTooSpain. Play that funky intro first and let's dance. Woohoo! Okay, the first thing to look at if we want to gauge how many Brits are leaving Spain is the official statistics. And these actually only tell us the number of official UK citizens who were resident each year up to 2023. They don't tell us how many left and how many arrived, just the total numbers who are registered as residents. So it's kind of impossible only from these figures to make blanket statements about how many Brits are leaving and exactly why. But it is a good place to start. Here's the graph by Statista. As you can see, from 2002 up to 2009, which is around the time the economic collapse happened, there was a rapid rise in the UK population in Spain from around 104,000 to around 302,000. Then it stayed in the low 300s, peaking in 2013 at 316,000. Then it dropped gradually to 284,000 in 2018, rose again to 300,000 in 2020, took a little bit of a tumble to 285, but that's not really a tumble, it's not actually that many less, and it stayed there more or less up to the latest figures in 2023. Now, there was a mention in the video as well of Spain's high unemployment, and here's an example of why talking to the man on the street won't get you the full picture. Here are the real unemployment figures on this graph, showing that although it peaked at nearly 27% in 2013, it dropped quite dramatically each year, except for the year 2020, down to just over 11% in 2023. So, blaming unemployment in any way for Brits leaving just doesn't add up at all. Evidently, something crucial happened in the Spanish economy and politics in 2013 to reverse the economic crisis and get people back to work. From what I've read, there was a huge cut in the budget that year, plus some reforms to the economy and pensions, and probably a lot more things happened then as well. More recently, there's been notable investment in the technology sector, which has created jobs and improved how Spain looks to Europe and the rest of the world in terms of investment. It brings people in, people with money. And while everyone else around Spain seemed to be having massive problems with fuel prices last year because of the troubles with Russia mainly, Spain was able to keep prices down because it was dealing with suppliers from North Africa instead, and that was good for getting goods around Spain, good for lots of things. So it looks like Spain's been on the up and up since there was any mention of Brexit, since well before there was any mention of Brexit. So why are people claiming that since 2016 Brits have been leaving in droves and Spain's looking like a ghost town? Let's get down to brass tacks. For a start, quite a lot of Brits hadn't registered as residents from way back when. So they're not showing up at all on the official figures. Some people have said that was illegal, but actually it wasn't illegal for Brits as EU citizens to do that. It's what's called irregular. It's important to know that. So before Brexit, they were commonly referred to as living under the radar. I think there was a common misconception that freedom of movement means you can just turn up with a few £1,000 in your pocket, buy a bar or start a cash business and move around or stay where you want and live the dream without having to bother with most of the paperwork. As EU citizens, which they all were up until the end of 2020, they had all of the rights and privileges of every other EU citizen. So unless they'd committed a crime, EU law said they couldn't actually be thrown out. And it seems that Spanish authorities at the time weren't overly concerned about chasing people to get them registered. I'd put a bet on it that quite a lot of Brits in Spain just weren't properly aware of what Brexit would actually mean for a lot of reasons. And I know that's going to cause arguments and recriminations and trolling, but it's obvious from what people say now that most of them were ignorant of the importance of registering that they wanted to stay in Spain after Brexit. That caught an awful lot of people out. Since Brexit, it's also evident that the authorities have tightened up on regulations because of the new status of Brits as non-EU citizens. So officials have probably had to sit down and study for quite a while, study all those rules so that they know what they're doing. And that's meant that they've more recently started properly chasing the ones living under the radar and encouraging them to leave. It does seem that the ones leaving have been mainly people who either didn't know what they had to do or who saw themselves as being entitled to live in Spain because they'd been there for ages or they'd got a house here. The word on the heavily Brit-populated streets evidently between 2016 and 2020 was that Boris would do a good deal for them and that they needn't worry, they're all fine. But it didn't turn out like that. A hard Brexit was touted by the engineers of the whole sordid affair, and that dumped a huge pile of poo on certain sections of the population. Was it their fault they didn't know what the hell was going on? Well, yes, of course it was, but also, no, of course it wasn't. What's also evident is the daily numbers of people applying for visas to move to Spain right now. BLS appointments, those are in the BLS offices that have taken over from the consulates in doing the visas. They're filled every day in all three of their offices, and some of the processes have become digital, so there's even more going on behind the scenes than there are people physically in the building at appointments. There are so many immigration lawyers and residency specialists dealing with visas and residency across Spain. I speak to lots of them all the time and they're so busy. So there's been no drop in people wanting to move here, in spite of what a lot of people are saying. What that means in terms of the graph I showed you earlier and the slight drop in numbers of UK citizens resident here is that some Brits who were officially registered have left, but not in huge numbers. How many have left who weren't registered is a complete unknown. There aren't, as far as I can see, any official numbers on that. Now, something else happened which you may remember that needs mentioning, that I've hinted at before when I went, 2020, COVID and the lockdowns in 2020 and 2021 just devastated many businesses because they couldn't operate at all. Lots of them closed down, and it seems some people headed back to the UK as soon as they could. So it is evident that for all those reasons I've mentioned, in the areas where there were lots of expats living, from the point of view of those expat populations gathered in their enclaves, it did look like they were living in ghost towns with closed businesses and fewer people in the bars. I'd have to say that the golden years of expats turning up and doing what they want is definitely over. But there's still a lot more to this situation. While it's still cheaper to live in Spain than the UK, food, utilities, etc., it's not as cheap as it was. And more importantly, it's more expensive to move to Spain now, because if you're not an EU citizen, if you're a UK citizen, you need to get a visa. So I'd say the situation isn't now so much about Brits leaving Spain, which is what the video I watched recently was saying and had in its title. It's really about how much more difficult it is now to move here and what you need to do. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I've already made quite a few videos about it, getting on for 500 videos on the YouTooSpain channel, and nearly half of them are live shows with specialists advising you all how to be successful in planning and applying for residency. So let's have a quick look at the cost of visas, which is putting off many Brits wanting to move here. The majority of people from the UK apply for the non-lucrative visa, which is the one where you're not allowed to work for the first 5 years until you can become a permanent resident. Most people moving here are over 50 years old and heading for or already in retirement, so that's the best visa for them, obviously. It costs about €500 each to make an application. Then you need to prove you have either passive income or savings equivalent to nearly €30,000 per year for a single person, and another getting on for €8,000 a year for each family member. So it's not cheap. And when you renew your residency after the first year, you're applying for a 2-year period. So if you don't have passive income, you need twice as much in the bank. Then there are other visas for people wanting to work. There's self-employment visa, the working visa, and the digital nomad visa. They're more difficult to get. I won't go through all of the rules, but suffice to say, you need to really put the bureaucratic work in to get the visa. And the burden of proof is on you to convince the authorities you're not going to be a burden on the state and that you've got what it takes to succeed. I haven't even mentioned the golden visa. Watch my other videos all about it if you want to know more about that. Something else mentioned in the other videos is the autonomo payments, or automino as a lot of people call them. You'll hear a lot of complaints that it's really expensive and makes it impossible to run a business, and it's blamed for businesses shutting down and people leaving, and it's a huge tax. And it wasn't until later in the video I mentioned earlier that the guy admitted that these so-called taxes are actually social security payments, and they cover your healthcare and your pension, which is better than the UK pension. And not only that, they cover your whole family's public health care, giving you all access to the brilliant public health care system here, which I can personally vouch for being better than the UK system. I've had radiotherapy and chemotherapy for months and months this year, and the service is excellent. They're going to operate on me next month with robot technology. It's awesome. Private healthcare for a whole family could cost you almost as much as the monthly social security payments that I've been doing every month. I mean, no one really enjoys watching their bank account dwindle every month by over €300, and I'm in a household with 2 self-employed people, so we're paying double that. But what you have to do is focus on what you get out of it in the end: free healthcare and a pretty good pension. Now, there are other costs when you're getting a visa too, like getting your documents sorted out and copied and made official and translated, and many people pay to have a specialist or lawyer help them with these things and get them through the process smoothly. If you want to know more about these costs and anything to do with visas and residency, best thing to do is watch the live shows on the Saturday mornings on this channel, or read the blogs on my website, YouTooSpain.com. There are quite a lot of them, and there's all the information you need and lots of resources and links and people you can contact to get even more advice that I trust implicitly. One more thing to say, and that is this: any UK citizens leaving now, as far as I can tell, and it does happen, it's still happening, are doing it perhaps because they're older and want to be nearer to relatives back home, or they miss the green of the British countryside, or they've not quite managed to survive in their businesses, or they've just run out of money. The Brits turning up now seem to be much more aware of the rules, better researched, and probably with a little more cash in the bank to tide them over in emergencies. And from the point of view of the Spanish authorities, that's a good thing. It's better for the economy if immigrants bring money with them and abide by the rules by registering properly and paying their taxes. It's also a fact that Brits aren't the only ones leaving. This is really important too. People from other European countries have too. Their numbers have gone down. They've dipped a little bit. And there have been more Spanish people leaving than returning recently. So You can't really say that Brexit is the big reason for Brits leaving, because they must be influenced by the other reasons why generally the population has dipped. In conclusion, it's complicated, and whether you get your information from statistics or someone down the pub, you're not going to have all the facts in front of you. Even if you have just those two bits of information, there has been a dip in the number of UK citizens in Spain, but it's not anywhere near as many as your man on the street in areas full of Brits will have you think. If you're living in those expat areas, or anyone else in the rest of Spain, tell us all. If the businesses are still closed, or has that changed more recently? Is it the same where you are, wherever you are in Spain? Tell us all in the comments below, and click on the like button if this has been helpful to you, and buy us a cup of coffee or three to keep me rabbiting on. There's a QR code on the screen and a super link in the video description below. You can always get in touch with me, and I'm always happy to chat, especially if I've got 3 cups of coffee inside me. Thanks for watching YouTooSpain. I'll see you in the next video or on the live show. Join me anytime you like. Peace and love, peas and fluff, and let's dance.